We're actually working with him. He's a project partner for EPICS, and he's also the founder of the Timmy Global Foundation, and he's a physician at Riley Hospital. So feel free to ask him questions. He has an amazing background, and I think you'll find him extremely, extremely interesting.
Thanks.
Dr. Chuck?
All right, let's get an idea here. What year students? We have seniors?
Fifth year.
Huh?
Fifth year.
Fifth year? It's so great, I'm staying around longer. Now, I was explaining to somebody once how I had 6 years at Purdue, you know.
Your veterinary school?
Well, actually, yeah, my undergraduate degree is in agriculture, probably like most of you. No, I was on my way to being a veterinarian, and then I withdrew from the vet school to go to medical school. So we have fourth year, third year. We have any first, second year students? Okay, cool. Any of you interested in biomedical engineering? Oh, cool, very good. Any of you interested in med school? Okay, thought I'd throw that out there. I wasn't the least bit interested, actually, when I was here at Purdue, and then as things developed. How many of you have seen this presentation before? Should we do the same one?
I like it a lot.
You can sit through it a second time?
Yeah.
I mean, it is your fifth year.
Yeah.
You've probably seen it 3 or 4 times. All right. Well, what I like to do, I want to make it kind of fun, if that's all right, although I know this is an engineering building and school, and frankly, I hated calculus, although I was happy to hear. Do you still take 2 years of calculus if you're in engineering, right? 4 semesters? Yeah. Just so you know, I checked with all my friends who are engineers. You'll never use it again, but I did check with them. They pretty much, most of them are supervisors at this point, so it's kind of interesting. I took one semester, and I said, that's enough math for me. As much as I love math, I figured that's the end of that. I think one thing that is beneficial, particularly if you're interested in being a doctor, be able to at least do some simple calculations in your head. I think I said one thing about smartphones, they've made us a lot dumber. You notice that? I used to have, 500, 600 phone numbers memorized in my head. I'm probably down to 20 or 30 at this point. But what I want to do today is talk about making a difference, and I think you'll find this interesting. I always tell people I've got the greatest job in the world, that I'm the caregiver of my spiritual leaders. I happen to take care of some kids who have just come to this planet to make us much better people, and I love the kids that I take care of. It has consumed my life to this point. As you can see there, I have Chuck Dietzen, MD, GSW. Do any of you know what the GSW degree is? Okay, there is no such thing. But hey, we live in a country where you want as many letters after your name as possible. I actually had a student spend the day with me one day, and he said at the end of the day, I said, well, what do you think? He said, might want to do pediatric rehab. And I said, what'd you think? He goes, I don't think this is for me. It seems to me you're just a glorified social worker. So GSW, glorified social worker, which my thinking is if I'm going to be taking care of kids and you're meeting their needs, and if you're truly a healer, you deliver what they need. You don't deliver what you can charge for. You don't deliver the business plan, which is what's happening to healthcare in this country. You deliver a treatment plan. And thankfully, in my life, I've been able to volunteer as a physician in 31 other countries. And I love my work outside of the U.S. And might as well tell you now, I've resigned from IU Health because, frankly, I want to just go take care of kids and not be impeded by the nonsense. The interesting thing is, though, because of what I do, I have been on the cutting edge of a lot of innovative things. And for one thing, I'm the co-founder of Isalis Healthcare, which is the second. It's every year it's rated in the top 10 in user friendliness. I mean, those of you who are, we have any computer science people in here? Okay. Let me give a little bit of advice. If you're going to be coding, if you're going to be developing something for a user, include the user on the design. There's a novel thought. I spoke at the HIMSS conference this year, Health Information Management, Health Information Management Services Society or something. It's kind of an unusual acronym. And as I started my lecture, I looked around the room and, here are all these developers. And I said, before I go any further, just a quick question. Am I the only clinician here today? And I was. So think about that. You have hundreds of people there who are coding and developing software for us to use in healthcare. They're not even talking to us to design that. Isn't that amazing? It is or not? I think, okay, just making sure. It seemed crazy to me. Anyway, so here's what I'd suggest. When you get doing what you do, don't settle for a job. Find your passion. That's the greatest advice I can give you. Live your passion. And sometimes it means it comes and goes. I've had a lot of unusual experiences in my life because sometimes I just go, okay, I've had enough of this. I'm going to go do something different. I've done that many times in my career. When I was a kid, I had a career path. I was raised Roman Catholic. Now I say I'm a Roman Catholic, but I wanted to be St. Francis. And so I had a little vet clinic underneath my apple tree out in the backyard. And I wasn't real successful taking care of the animals, so I also had a little cemetery underneath the apple tree. Okay? And I think some of you can relate to this as like, what really impacted you as a child? And I was darn sure I was going to be a veterinarian because that was the closest thing I could think of to being St. Francis. But then a strange thing happened. When I was 7, Mikey, I remember my mom saying, hey, there's a little boy that needs a family. Should he come here? You're like, what? He doesn't have a family? 2-year-old boy, Mikey, came to live with us when I was 7, and Mikey was the first of 150 foster kids over the next 20 years. So at some point, my mom said to me, have you ever thought about being a pediatrician? You seem to have a great gift with children. So let me just say to you, those things that your mother's been plugging into your head all these years, eventually those might take root, because I ended up, came here, studied animal science, School of Agriculture, got accepted into the vet school, and then I, just started thinking about looking at these kids that were around me who didn't have families, they had very few belongings, and I thought, my God, these kids are really at risk. It's not just animals, they're children. So I thought, maybe Mom's right. That's what I should look into. So I ended up withdrawing from the Purdue School of Veterinary Medicine, and then did my first 2 years of med school here. And those of you who are interested in med school, you understand we got that regional campus program. So you got 9 different locations around the state where you can go. And one of the things I found that taking care of these kids made me dive a lot into what do I really believe, what do I really value, what's really important in life. And I did a lot of reading. Henry Nouwen, who was a Dutch priest, used to teach in the U.S., Notre Dame, Yale, Harvard, places like that. And he just did some great writing on what's life really about, and the fact that our life is a possession, is not a possession to be defended, but a gift to be shared. The leader was reading some stuff in the more recent years. Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Vietnamese monk who wrote about, not about Abby, he wrote about Karuna. He wrote some great little books, quick reads, that are how to walk, how to eat, how to talk, how to breathe. Sounds pretty simple, but it's a great philosophy if you read what he has to talk about. But Karuna is the Sanskrit word which means sharing, removing, and transforming suffering. And see, Henry Nouwen had written a book called Compassion with 2 other authors. And compassion literally means to suffer with, or to experience with. If you don't want to suffer, let's just experience things with people. But Karuna is where we're going beyond the encounter. So, what has happened in my life, I just started taking care of kids all over the world. I went to Russia and Estonia, was very involved in Haiti, got pulled to India, and then it just took off. I get called into war zones, I get called in after natural disasters or man-made disasters to save kids. And you know what? It's a pretty cool way to spend life. So, these are the principles the children taught me, and I'm going to try to run through these quickly because I'd love to just sit and chat with you for a while. One thing I learned, this is Abby Louder from Greenfield, Indiana. When my mom said to me, have you ever thought about being a doctor? I said there were 3 reasons I didn't want to be a doctor. One was, doctors aren't my kind of people. They're a little too stuffy. In fact, I was invited to say, they said, hey, if you can stay over and have dinner with some of the students, that'd be great. I said, I'm supposed to be at a dinner at the Union tonight. And then I've called in and found out, oh, that's right. It's the dignitaries, and we're supposed to be in business professional. I'm like, I don't need a tie, so I canceled that. So if you do want to have dinner after this, we will. And we will be informal. But doctors seemed a little too stuffy to me. The other part, I remember, I'm like 12 years old, I said to my, I don't know about cutting up a cadaver. You know, you got to hack up a body. Just by the way, those of you who might want to do medicine, by the time they're preserved, they look like clay models. It was really not that impressive after all. And then thirdly, how would I survive children dying? That was what concerned me the most. And lo and behold, the first patient ever assigned to me at Riley Hospital was Abby Louder. 3 years old, she was diagnosed with ALL, acute lymphocytic leukemia and lymphoma, and she was going to die. And what I noticed was that when we decided children weren't going to make it, we spent far less time with them. And eventually, somebody did research in this. I always find, boy, you know, you get a grant to figure out the obvious. Truly, the amount of time spent at the bedside of a child that's not going to live, it's amazing how it's reduced. And I don't think that's fair to the child, nor do I really think it's fair to the caregiver. And I thought, how scary. You imagine how scary that is if you're 3 years old and these people who used to come in and spend time with you are just kind of going by and, you know, they're looking at their numbers and moving on. So I used to stay with her at night, and I'd read stories to her and get her a McDonald's hamburger and French fries, because that was one thing that she would eat. She was wasting away, but she had this huge belly because the liver and the spleen were so full of cancer. Her arms and legs were no bigger around than a silver dollar. And each night, the doctor would call in, talk to the nurse. The nurse would go, yes, yeah. You know, inevitably, I was right outside the nurse's station. Phone would ring. She'd come in and say, you have to go home. Because they were certain that when she died, I'd be devastated. And I was pretty certain that when she died, I'd be devastated also. I was certain of that. But, you know, as I tell people, if you do this work, and if you're really passionate about what you're doing, you're going to step close enough to get burned. So I just got ran out of the hospital each night, but, oh, yeah, although the data were wrong, that's Abby on her wedding day. That's one of her 4 children. You see, we study science. I'm actually taking a course in spirituality right now, which I think is really cool. And frankly, I love quantum mechanics because somehow this is all coming together. I don't know how many of you had an opportunity to read, but it's incredible, these things that are happening in quantum mechanics. But I always tell people, look, I can tell you we've got data, certain chemotherapy, certain radiation treatments, and outcomes are this. The child has a 1% or 2% chance of survival. Truth be told, these days I'm afraid we're killing more people with our treatments than healing them. When we look at some of the treatments for cancer, they're very, very tough on a body. What does being present bring to the game? Where's the data on that? if we don't abandon the patient and they have hope and their immune system stays up, maybe that's what really matters. So the important thing in healthcare, I think, is that if you're developing software and if you're interested in the sorts of technology that we apply to a patient, it still must come with a human. And then being present, you get to see these kinds of incredible outcomes. You've got to be vulnerable. If any of you think you would be interested in working with children or in healthcare, this is probably the coolest thing I've been doing for 28 years now. CHAMP Camp. CHAMP is the acronym Children Have a Lot of Motivation and Potential. Those of you who are doing the EPICS programs with us at Riley Hospital understand, like Terry, who was a victim of child abuse. They broke his neck so high he not only couldn't move his arms and legs anymore, but he could never breathe again. And so that funky looking saddlebag hanging from the horse, that's a ventilator that breathes for him. And then this adorable little girl over here, Erin Elzia, was from St. Louis. And I remember going around after camp and I said, how do we make camp better next year? And I wanted to have their voices, so I had this little microcassette recorder and I said, how do we make camp better next year? And you know what? Erin looks up. I bet you can think, s'mores every night. Erin looks up and says, hot air balloons and race cars. See, these are the people you should be hanging out with, all right? You can learn some of the greatest life lessons from some of the youngest heroes. She got that. And I remember saying to her, I go, ooh, Erin, I don't know. I might be afraid about going up in a hot air balloon. And she looked up and says, don't worry, I'll go with you. These are the people you should hang with. And so the kids at this camp, the way we describe CHAMP Camp, it's children who are on ventilator assistance or need substantial technological assistance. So you see the engineering, and I said this is the beauty. I always joke with engineering students, like this is where we eggheads get to use our hearts. We put all this together, and it is the neatest experience. So this year, the camp theme is out of this world. So I just got back from Santa Fe. I scored 30 meteorites. Is that cool to any of you? I think every camper is going to get a meteorite. That's a camp I'd want to go to. And we've got them set up with the guy that owns the drone company in Indianapolis. A lot of these kids, the way they draw, imagine being totally paralyzed, and they can't even breathe. They may use a mouth stick or their eyes to write up their reports. Many of our campers go on to college. But imagine not having the ability to have any movement other than your neck and face muscles. And just so you know, yes, horseback riding is possible, even if you can't take a breath. Now, clearly, you don't just put them on the horse and smack the horse. You got some things you got to do. They've taught us a lot of things about that. And then, of course, we have had race cars at camp, and in this case, this little girl actually could use her hands, so she's steering the car with one hand and pushing air into her lungs with the Ambu bag on the other. As you might have guessed, this takes a little bit of engineering. You also need to be ordinary. Now, when I was younger, I had this belief that here I'm one of my great, I remember I was going to go to India to help out over there, and they said, would you like to meet with Mother the next time you're here? I wanted to say hell yes, but it was Mother, so I go, yes, of course, right? Who wouldn't want to meet Mother Teresa? And she's the short one in the middle, by the way. Mother had a great sense of humor. I used to tell people I was going to turn this into a business card and put Dietzen and Associates on it, but some people don't have such a sense of humor. But anyway, I remember going over there and thinking, I can't possibly do what these ladies do. They're extraordinary. And then what you discovered was this. No, they were ordinary, but they had an extraordinary mission. And so I would encourage you to be thinking about that. What can you, an ordinary person, go out and tie on to that's so important for this world that it demands your interest and your passion? So find that extraordinary mission for yourself. Mother Teresa always said, find your own Calcutta. Michael was a great example of a little guy who, you look at him, I mean, this kid isn't going to go to Purdue, he's not going to study engineering, he's not going to be the varsity cheerleader, wasn't valedictorian, he had cerebral palsy and he lived a short life. But I'll tell you this, when you walked into that room and he came to clinic and his mom and then his sister and brother, and the love that this kid radiated, you're going, if you ever question if love is not really the meaning of all this, hang out with somebody like Michael for the day. Be courageous. I did a lot of work in India, and I'll tell you, once you hang out with Mother Teresa, I remember when I met her, I didn't expect red carpet and trumpets, but I thought there'll be a little bit of formality. There wasn't. And the nun said, now when Mother finds out you're not married yet, she'll probably ask you to become a priest. And I remember going, okay, that'll be my omen. Like if Mother, whatever she asks for, you're going to give it to her, right? And so my heart rate was about 180, 190 beats a minute, which was the same heart rate I had the night I ran the bulls in Pamplona, Spain in 1995 and laid awake all night thinking, I'm going to die tomorrow. And so your heart rate tends to get up. You're also thinking, like, are there any things I need to wrap up in this planet before I leave? But I remember standing there. She didn't ask me to, so therefore I'm still working with students and practicing medicine. And there I was in India, taking care of children, and they would bring these kids in, and they don't have a lot of the simple things we have. You know, so a lot of the parents in this poor area the mothers would walk their sons in on their feet because they were so spastic, or they brought them in wheelbarrows. And they brought this little girl in, and they said, do you know what this is? And I said, you probably have a better idea than I do, but I've read enough history, medical history. I assume this is Pott's disease. That's what this is. It's tuberculosis of the spine, P-O-T-T'-S, Pott's disease. So we saw this in kids as young as 4. And I remember coming back from this trip, and someone said, how successful was your trip, Dr. Chuck? How many surgeries did you do? I said, it was real successful. We did 26 surgeries. I think we only have 3 million to go. And you see, that's when Timmy Global Health got started. I came back from that trip, and I'm tossing and turning thinking, my God, kids are suffering and dying. We got to do something about this. And then you think, well, maybe if those 26 each touch 26 and those 26 touch 26, and for my part, I came back to the U.S. and started Timmy Global Health, and I said to the students, come with me, you can help us do this now. We don't need to wait for you to have a degree. You can help us heal children, and you can save lives. And you can have your life profoundly changed. So Timmy Global Health now, we have about 50 chapters around the U.S., and Purdue, of course, is one of them. And we have them all over in universities and now some high schools also, and medical schools and nursing schools are starting chapters. Mother used to say, it's not my job to be successful, it is my job to be faithful. And I always liked that because, frankly, we're fighting a losing battle. There are so many people in need out there, so we're not going to run out of patience. And then you got to recognize potential. This is my good friend Karen Cornell. She became like a little sister to me. Karen died at the age of 33. She'd had 28 surgeries by the time she was 24. And she said to me, if anybody should know what it's like to have access to health care, it's me. She had Larson syndrome, so the connective tissue in her spine, throughout her body, her hip, she had a dislocated hip, she had scoliosis, it caused the collapse of her airway. She was on a ventilator. We had to put her on a ventilator at night. She went to 9 different countries, went on 9 trips to 7 different countries with us to take care of others. So I always said there's no good excuse to not be involved in that. You got to be true. One of the things that concerns me most about this country, and frankly, why I like working in most any country but this one, I think we've forgotten our sense of community in this country. And I love my work elsewhere because of how we come together to work together to make sure that others are taken care of. Margie Luna was from Westfield, Indiana. She died of cancer at the age of 17. She also became a very close friend of mine. I'd just gotten back from working with Mother Teresa, and I'm sprinting through the hospital to get to my clinic, and the nurse yells, "Margie, that's the doctor that met Mother." And Margie jumps up out of her recliner, she grabs her IV pole, runs me down and said, "Tell me about Mother." And so I did, and I gave her one of the rosaries that Mother had given me, and Margie was going to get her wish granted by Indiana Children's Wish Fund. She was going to get a Versace gown for the prom, and I know that means nothing to us guys, but the women usually go, "Yeah, that makes sense." And she ended up passing on that and went with me to help take care of the kids in India in February of 1998. And then, unfortunately, we get back from that trip, and it wasn't 2 to 3 weeks later, she just shifted her weight in the car and her hip broke. So we knew that the cancer was back with a vengeance. And Margie died about 7 months after that. But she promised me she'd be my guardian angel. I promised her we'd take care of the kids in Quito, Ecuador. So what does that mean? You know, she was born in Quito. Her mother was from Indiana, her father from Quito, Ecuador. Now I've made a promise. I got to be true to it. You don't need to write a contract, right? You say what you're going to do, and you do it. It's pretty simple. So we circled up like a bunch of yaks. What's that got to do with anything? See, I'm an animal science major. Okay, you guys you're bright enough. You're engineering students. Are you all engineering students, right? Okay. So here's the problem. Healthcare in this country is the #1 cause of bankruptcy. Did you know that? How about that? Yeah, we can cure your little boy or girl, but it'll take everything you have. Isn't that a wonderful way to practice medicine? I started telling people we need to circle up like a bunch of yaks, and for those who have never seen Discovery Channel or Nat Geo, when the predators come around, the adult yaks circle up, the young are in the middle, and they face off against the predators. Isn't that cool? Yeah, well, I gave a talk. I was invited by the Indiana State Medical Association to give their big keynote address to get them fired up. I probably should have looked at the itinerary, but I didn't. I got in there, rushed from the hospital, run in, I give this talk. I tell this story, and I said, we need to circle up like a bunch of yaks and tell the politicians, the attorneys, and the businessmen to go to hell. We don't need their input. And the place erupted. And they're all cheering. And I'm like, let's just stop there. So I start walking out. They all cheer. They walk out with me. Unbeknownst to me, Todd Rakita, who happens to be a congressman who's an attorney, was following me on his talk. But hey, I still believe we need to circle up like a bunch of yaks. We need to fix this stuff. So, promising Margie that we could do this, what did that mean? All right. We go to Quito, Ecuador. Now we serve 133 communities, probably 75 to 80 of them in Ecuador alone. We built a 139-bed hospital because I promised Margie we would do something. So I meet Padre Carollo. Padre Carollo did the memorial service for Margie 1 year from the date of her death. I meet him. He says, we're going to build a 100-bed hospital. It will cost us $500,000. He said, I had $100,000, so we bought the land, fenced it in, put in the drainage, built the foundation. He said, now I pray. And I said, can you come to the U.S. and be my CFO? I like the way you think. You know, it's more of a chief faith officer rather than a chief financial officer. Anybody know what the cost is to build a hospital in the U.S. right now? Brace yourself. $5,000 a bed. It ended up, the inflation hit, the economy went out. They switched to the U.S. dollar in about 2000. So I met him in 99, 2000. Their president left Ecuador. He's teaching in the Ivy League now. They've been trying to get him extradited back there for some time.